Hi, this is Beth from the West Allis Public Library, and welcome to another episode of our Let's Go on Vacation book club. We are on day 3 in our trip to London, visiting the Tower of London. We are picking up on chapter 6, The Two Little Princes in the Tower. Some people think that the ravens like to live in the tower because so many people were killed there. Dead bodies are food for ravens. Two kinds of executions used to take place in the tower. Ordinary people were hanged on the gallows. Lords and ladies had their heads cut off. Usually, people were killed outside the walls on Tower Hill so that the crowds could watch. People thought of it as entertainment. Very important people were allowed to be beheaded privately inside the tower walls. It was a quick and relatively painless death compared to other forms of execution. The victim paid the headsman beforehand. This was to be sure he did a good job. Sometimes he did a bad job, or the axe wasn't sharp enough. Then it might take many strokes before the person's head was cut all the way off. After someone was beheaded, the executioner would hold the head up high so everyone could see the person was dead. There were not really all that many executions in the tower. In its entire history, only about 135 people were put to death there, and only about 19 of them were killed inside the tower's walls. The rest were killed on Tower Hill, outside. But there were other ways to die in the tower without being executed. Inside the tower walls, it was easy to get rid of an enemy secretly. Then the public could be told that the person had gotten sick and died. Or the death could be kept secret altogether. One person who was secretly killed in the tower was George Plantagenet, the Duke of Clarence. He was convicted of treason against his brother, King Edward IV. This means the king was afraid George was trying to take the throne away from him. George died in 1478 while he was being held in the tower. The legend is that he was drowned in a barrel of wine. After his death, his daughter always wore a charm shaped like a barrel in his honor. By far, the most famous people to be killed in the tower are the two little princes. They were innocent children who got trapped in a struggle among powerful groups of men. In 1483, King Edward IV died. He left behind 2 sons. The older child became King Edward V, but Edward was only 12 years old, not old enough to rule. A person called the regent ruled for him. Since the regent controlled the boy king, he was the one really ruling the country. Edward's uncle Richard served as regent and also guardian to the young king. Richard, however, wanted to be king himself. So he had Edward and Edward's 9-year-old brother, also named Richard, moved to the tower. He said he put them there to keep them safe, but really the 2 boys were prisoners. For a while, they were seen playing in the garden. Then they disappeared. Exactly what happened to them is a mystery. Most people think they were murdered in the tower. According to legend, they were smothered with pillows while they slept. The most likely murderer was their uncle, who went on to become King Richard III. Richard had a strong motive for murdering his nephew Edward. As long as Edward was alive, people could use the boy as an excuse to fight. They could try to get rid of Richard and put Edward back on the throne. But some people think Richard wasn't the killer. They say the next king, Henry VII, was the real murderer. His claim to the throne was even more shadowy than Richard's. So Edward was even more of a threat to him. But no one knows. There were even stories that the little princes hadn't been killed at all. 2 young men showed up several years later, claiming to be the princes from the tower. Some people believed them. In 1674, workmen at the tower dug up a box that held small skeletons. Most people believe that these are the bones of the 2 little princes. If so, they were definitely murdered soon after they moved to the tower. But we will never know for sure who did it. The tower where the boys were kept was called the Garden Tower because it had its own garden. But after their deaths, it was renamed the Bloody Tower. And that's what it's been known as ever since. Oof, that's a rough chapter. Chapter 7, Gunpowder and Fire. The Tower of London has been the center for several government departments. In the Middle Ages, one of these was called the Privy Wardrobe. The Privy Wardrobe. It started as the office in charge of the king's private possessions. This meant clothing and furniture. It also included treasure, documents, and arms and armor. The importance of the wardrobe grew and changed. It became the department that stored and kept track of all the weapons, armor, and gunpowder that the king would need if he went to war. Some of the armor was so beautiful that it was put on display for people to admire. In the 17th century, an exhibit was set up. It showed life-size figures of every ruler since William the Conqueror. They were all on horseback, and, except for Queen Elizabeth I, they were all dressed in their finest armor. In 1666, a terrible fire broke out in London. It looked like the fire might reach the tower. The tower was full of 500,000 pounds of gunpowder. What would happen if a fire hit that? If all that gunpowder exploded at once, it would destroy the building. And it would take out most of London with it. Men from the Navy quickly began carrying the gunpowder from the tower to the ships on the River Thames. From there, it could be floated to safety. This was a very dangerous job. The air was full of ashes and sparks. If a single one hit a barrel of gunpowder, the barrel would catch fire and explode. Then the whole area would go up in flames. Against the odds, the men safely got all the gunpowder away, and the fire was stopped before it reached the tower. Like most governments, the kings of England produced a lot of paperwork. For many years, all the important papers were kept with the king, no matter where he was. The king didn't just live in one palace. He would move around the country, staying in various mansions along the way. And all these papers had to come with him wherever he went. By the late 13th century, there were so many papers that this was impossible. So, the papers were stored in the tower. There was no special room for them, and no organized system to keep track of them. The papers had to compete for space with the gunpowder and the prisoners. They were just kept on the floor, all mixed up. It wasn't until the early 20th century that the papers got their own building to be stored in. All right, that is where we will stop for today. We'll pick up tomorrow with a chapter called Making Money. So that sounds interesting. All right, thank you for watching the Let's Go on Vacation Book Club. I'm Miss Beth, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.